Hi, everyone. Welcome to the PTI podcast. As always, I have Emmanuel. How are you going?
I'm good. I'm good. Enjoying my day. Got a coffee, water, and excited to chat with our guest.
Yeah, today we've got Zoe, a dietitian working in the NDIS space. Zoe, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. First of all, Emmanuel and Mary, thank you so much for having me on the podcast today. To our listeners, my name is Zoe Brain. I'm an accredited practicing dietitian and co-founder of Brain of a Dietitian. Pardon the pun, that's two brains, one in my last name and one in my head. We at Brain of a Dietitian, we are a registered NDIS provider. We support a range of people with needs, from complex needs with intellectual disability, psychosocial disabilities, neurological and physical disabilities. And I guess as from a dietetic standpoint, my focus is not just telling people what to eat, but helping them implement that advice into their everyday life. So that's a little bit about me.
And somehow you make the food look absolutely amazing.
Oh,
Just
thanks.
I don't know if anyone's seen some of the photos that we've done for the one where you had all the meals done for building bridges. Oh my God. I think it was that people, I think people turned up just to eat the food. They didn't care about us. They were like, "Oh, look at this. I'm eating this."
Oh, I'm glad everyone enjoyed it. Lots of colors. That's what I pride myself in. Eat the rainbow.
So, I'm going to launch in with the elephant in the room, I think. So, you guys had your rate cut 2 years in a row now. So, what are the thoughts?
It's quite concerning, to be honest, because I think it just shows the trajectory that dietitians are on. And I feel, if the NDIS is already undervaluing our work as it is, where are we going to be in 3 to 5 years? We just sort of don't know. Or, will NDIS cut dietitians completely from the scheme? And then kind of encourage people to go through Medicare or private health insurance to access supports. So it's quite upsetting, to be honest, and I just don't think the NDIS is seeing our value.
I mean, like, what other interpretation is there really? Like, if they,
Yeah.
especially 2 years in a row, like
Mm.
that's rough. And knowing that, prices are on the rise, like that's not helping you guys out. But also like, why don't why don't we try and show our listeners the value you do bring? Like, what does that look like? How do you change participants' lives?
Yeah, in many, many ways. So we obviously do our home visits. We do comprehensive nutrition assessments where we'll understand everything to do with dietaries, medical history, medications, and everything that sort of impacts the individual and their ability to progress towards their goals. We work with families, the support workers, coordinators, everyone on the allied health team, to make sure that everyone's sort of on the same boat and achieving the best health outcomes possible. I guess what I do as a dietitian, I also go into the homes and teach them culinary skills as well. So I'm a big believer that I want to help, put my advice into the food of participants. And so we'll stand there and we'll learn about nutrition education as well as the practical strategies involved too. Um, yeah, and I think, with that, success looks different for everyone. And that's why the work of a dietitian is so important, because we can adapt to different people and different needs.
Do you guys also do the training of, for example, that would be included, right? So you're
Yeah.
also looking at the whole ecosystem around the individual. Probably a silly question, but because I'll be honest with you, as support coordinators, often we with dietetics we think, okay, well, there's some potential restrictions, and then the dietitian comes in and looks at the whole and tries to create a nutritious, well, good tasting meal.
Yeah.
But you guys also do the whole skill set, not just with the participants, I'm assuming also around them.
Yes, exactly. So what I do as a dietitian, I'll not only tell you what to eat, but I'll show you how to eat. So basically, we'll have participants being able to build their own meal plans, create their own recipes, and eventually do it all independently. And that's why the hands-on support is so important. And working with that ecosystem and working with the allied health team, it's just not the work of the dietitian in isolation. I'll need to sort of teach the support worker as well to be able to go in and continue on my work with the participant when dietetics fundings run out. So there's so
Mm.
much involved in our practice that goes beyond just making meal plans or providing simple recommendations.
And like I think also people don't just we forget sometimes because we eat every day, like the importance of
Yeah.
nutrition and how that like impacts us and I know that like for example when we're doing behavior support, there's been so many times where we know that like caffeine is like a trigger for a certain type of behavior, and so we need to get the dietitian in to help that person decide how they want to kind of wean themselves off, and that's such an important process
Mm.
as well. Like I'm sure you see this all the time. It's like, you know, people can be quite unmotivated to like do like look after themselves essentially, and really what it comes down to sometimes is they're just like they're not getting enough nutrition, they don't have the energy to do anything, and
Yeah.
like that role is so vital.
Definitely, could not agree more. And as well as that, nutrition is very individualized. Like exactly as you said before, Mary, that participant was exposed to caffeine and that triggers their symptoms. I have other participants that, can't have avocado, even cold water, that triggers an off response for the Parkinson's medication, for example. So, there's so many different elements and layers of nutrition that everyone is very different and there's no one size fits all. And that's why the work of a dietitian is very important in this space. It's just not being recognized by the NDIS, which is quite sad.
Why do you think
Yeah.
that is? Like, what is the miss? Like, what is the
Mm.
like what's going on here?
Exactly. And I ask myself the same question every day. I think it comes down to the fact that people can access dietetics through Medicare or private health insurance. And there is a lot of evidence that, on a chronic disease management plan, you get 5 sessions with the dietitian, and that's the evidence-based standard. Tick off, you're done. But what they're forgetting is the complex needs, the fact that as a dietitian, I need to completely change my practice. I need to be able to educate someone in a very different way than I would to someone, in a mainstream sort of model where it's like, here's a resource, educating, via the sit and talk model. With people with disability, I do a lot of games, I do activities, I do culinary skills. So there's actually so much more involved, and they just don't see that. They basically just see what policy is.
And
Mm.
is the 5 like Medicare sessions like really even in that mainstream sort of setting like
Yeah.
enough? Because that seems to be an assumption as well.
Mm. No, no.
That was a
Like,
very nice no. I
no,
love
to
it.
put it
Very nice no.
simply. Like, it sort of allows me to do, an initial assessment and then 4 follow-ups, which would be scheduled sort of bi-monthly throughout the year. But even that, it's not as intensive enough as someone actually needs to change. What you're doing here is you're not only teaching someone what they need to do, but you're actually helping behavior change. As a BSP, you would understand too.
Yeah, and like
So
habit formation and
habit formation, like it goes way beyond 5 sessions to form a habit, in my opinion. So
oh yeah. I mean, some of the literature is saying that like you essentially it takes up to a year sometimes to form
yeah,
like not even a complex habit. Like I would argue that like a dietary change is quite a complex habit to
yeah,
change.
I can
I
relate.
don't know
Yep.
about everyone else. I'm always snacking.
yes.
So
If you looked at
And
my desk, I've got snacks
hey,
oh
I'm
staring
coming
at
at
me.
you guys.
No, they're gluten
They
free.
better be
They're
dietitian approved. But that's exactly it, right? And say with that 5 sessions, right? And how hard it is to actually change your behavior. Add the next layer of intellectual disability on top of that. It requires so much more preparation, so much more planning. You need to be able to learn concepts in maybe a visual way or a physical way, doing it yourself. Like, you can't really do all of those things in 5 sessions alone.
Mm.
and from an NDIS perspective, what is the average amount of hours that you guys typically see in terms of approval to work with someone? I know it's a pretty broad question, but just
Yeah, at the moment there's such a range, but it would usually be 12 hours. 12 hours for the plan, um, or 6 hours depending on the level of disability. But again, I've got some participants with quite complex needs and they only get 6 hours, whilst other participants who are quite independent will get 12. So there's just no standardization. You can never really tell.
well, that's funny because actually, well, there's a mutual client that I just was looking at today that only
Yeah.
got 3.5 hours. of time with you, and I was like, oh, okay, and I immediately said, well, you're right. What are we like? What are we
What
doing?
can we
It's almost
do?
it could potentially be almost a waste of time. Arguably. But
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's interesting to see the miss. Um, is the mainstream evidence for all, or I guess data, kind of not helping you, if that makes sense, or not helping dietitians in this case, like especially with the link to disability? Is that a factor? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because the mainstream mainly looks at chronic disease like
Mm,
diabetes or
mm,
high cholesterol or weight or things like that. It doesn't factor in the complex layer of disability as well. So it's definitely not helping at
mm.
all.
And because I'd
Yeah.
imagine, because I mean, you kind of always know this, but when I first spoke to you about this, I really understood a little bit more about the link between nutrition and actual behavior. Because to me, it's like, oh, sugar, like I eat sugar, but you don't like it actually has an impact. So is there like, because the thing that we struggle with as support coordinators, for example, is justifying the need for dietetics in situations that are more psychosocial.
Yeah.
So like I'm assuming there's evidence out there to say, hey, hang on, if you give this person a balanced, nutritious diet, plus obviously understanding it's going to take some time, that there are going to be some potential outcomes that could reduce funding later on down the track.
Definitely. There are so many studies, especially in the psychosocial space. There are so many studies that show that, a good gut health helps with mental health. It helps with mental clarity. It helps with decision making. With good decision making comes good nutrition. Comes good nutrition, you've got energy. Energy makes good decisions. So everything is a flow and effect of each other.
Mm.
And so there's just so much evidence out there to back nutrition and what we do. And even from that aspect, you can teach the education, but then you also need to teach the capacity building around that. And Emmanuel, that's what you were saying with that 3-hour client who only got funded 3 hours. With that, how can my initial assessment is 1.5 hours, right? So that's half that time. In initial assessment, I'll gather as much information from the client as possible. They'll walk away with some practical strategies to start with, but then I'm only left with 1.5 hours left to try and fit a whole year's work of behavior change and nutrition education. Like, how can it just doesn't work? And it almost sounds as though the 3-hour sort of model should actually be the Medicare model, where someone comes to me with type 2 diabetes. I can do an initial assessment 1 hour, educate them for the second hour, and do a follow-up, later in the year for the other hour. That's your 3. So do you see what I mean? How there's just such discrepancy and none of it really makes sense?
Mm. And I'm like, at what point is it even worth like initiating? Because I know, like, from a psych perspective, there is a point where, like, if you don't have enough funding, you're actually doing more harm than good. So it's better to wait until there's an appropriate amount of funding to go in and do a deep delve. But for you guys, like, what does that like is there a point where, like, if you got like 2 hours, like, really you just do an assessment, there's nothing left to do? Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? I've actually had to turn away clients for
Mm.
that. A way around it would be the most I can do is see a participant for an hour over telehealth, which, keep in mind, there is that barrier of rapport building in the first place. And then for the second hour, maybe I could write an advocacy letter or some sort of something to showcase the need for dietetics and to try and advocate for more funding in the next plan. But even then, does the NDIS even read reports or advocacy letters
I'm
or
not
anything?
answering that question.
Yes. I'm
uh,
like, oh,
So you
the
yeah.
other
couldn't
thing,
even do anything, like you couldn't even write like a report with that amount anyway, because
No.
you've already used, like, what, half of it, like you said, to complete the assessment, and then the other half is going to be a letter asking for more funds, and then essentially nothing has happened. So we've used up taxpayer funds and achieved not much at all because of how low it's been funded.
That's it. That's it.
so, and this is going to sound like a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I don't think it's worth ever assuming. And I like to ask questions. So, going into the home for as a dietitian
Mhm.
has so much value than just doing it telehealth, because as you mentioned so far in this conversation, you're talking about a holistic approach. You would also be assessing what they've actually got available to them in terms of space, how that operates. And I'm assuming there'd be some considerations about, any kind of function as well, what they can and can't do. So getting into their environment is quite important. So therefore, you also then have the transport changes, the cuts, plus the not only the rate cuts but also the changes to the actual amounts you can charge for travel. Like that would have impacted even more, the what you've got access to, because you're talking about 12 hours, but 12 hours also includes travel. So
yeah, that's exactly it.
yeah. So how did the travel changes affect you guys, given that your funding is typically not as abundant?
Yeah, it just means that I'm not able to service participants in rural and remote areas. It means I've had to sort of
Yeah.
strict where I can service my areas, which is quite sad because originally we sort of serviced participants all over Sydney, inner west, everywhere. But now I'm sort of restricted in terms of how far I can travel.
And we know you can't get anywhere in Sydney in half an hour.
Oh, absolutely not. No. And then on the back of home visits as well, exactly, you're right by saying home visits are so important to understand the food environment. Like, again, we're talking about capacity building here. If I'm providing education and I don't even know what someone's home or fridge or pantry or cooking equipment or anything looks like, how can I tailor my advice to the individual and how can they actually make those changes? They can't. That's like literally me saying, oh, just go cook a 3-course meal, but giving no recipe or no equipment or no walkthrough, not even teaching someone how to cook the 3-course meal. Do you know what I mean? It's words, not action.
We should also actually do that. You should give me very vague instructions, and I'll go and cook a meal and see what it looks like.
Yeah,
Because I don't
that
think
would
it'd be
actually
great.
be a great advocacy campaign.
Oh my gosh, we should do it. We should
We should do
absolutely do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got one knife, so if that helps.
Yeah, go chop these vegetables. You can't, no knife.
Yeah, sure, I'll go chop them.
Yeah.
And then side by side of you showing what it should look like versus what I've actually done. Yeah,
Love
that'd
it.
be hilarious. Yeah.
So it really seems like at least with other professions there is kind of like we can rely on telehealth options, we can fall back to that. Like it's not ideal for some participants, but it seems like with dietetics, like you really need that home environment because there's so many like actual objects in the home that you need to look at. So how are we compensating for that now that you're probably forced to do a little bit more telehealth than you would like?
We're compensating because, well, I'm just doing it out of my own time. Even if I have been given an hour or something, I personally do like to go see the client because that means my practice is also better as a dietitian. So I just do it out of my own time. So of course that's then staffing costs you consider, petrol prices and travel time that's not considered. All of these sorts of things, you're actually losing a lot as a business. And then it makes you think, is it worth continuing on with this activity? You just don't know. But then I guess for the purposes of doing the telehealth, you need to ask all the questions. You need to hope that the people that you're speaking to, the supports, the team around the participant understands the participant so much that they can give you the valuable information that's accurate.
And are you finding like how are you finding actually getting that information? Because I know like at least like from our end, like the information gathering can be a little bit spotty sometimes, and one person says one thing and another person says another thing, and it's kind of hard to know without actually being there.
Yeah, it's so difficult. It's so difficult. It's just, and with that, how can you even get all of the information you need within such a short time frame if there's spotty evidence everywhere? Someone saying one thing, another person saying another thing, it's really difficult.
I wanted to share a story with you if that's okay.
Yeah.
Because like just to further kind of emphasize just how important dietetics is in just like a holistic approach fit for any person. So we've had several participants where there have been like major behaviors of concern, like lots of aggression, lots of incontinence, and they're at risk of losing their placements at day program, for instance. But then we have a dietitian come in and they've been able to like identify that, for instance, like too much sugar or too much caffeine use is leading to additional sort of incontinence, which has then by changing that diet has reduced the need for incontinence aids, which was like aggravating the individual. And so we were able to remove the incontinence aids so that they were like, because there was less sort of episodes, and they were able to keep their placements and essentially, live a happy life, all because, right, a dietitian came in and helped identify, like, this is what's going on for this person's behavior, this is why this incontinence is happening, made a plan, followed through with the plan, and this person has benefited greatly. So I just think that, like, I mean, you can say it like plenty of times, though, but like nutrition really does underpin literally everything. So,
Quite literally everything. Exactly. And to build on top of that, I'll also share a story as well. I have a participant with advanced stage Parkinson's disease. I've been seeing her for a couple of years now, and some foods cause the medication to work, meaning that her symptoms are quite at bay, whereas other foods cause her medication to stop, meaning that she's got the tremors and everything like that. And it's been an ongoing battle because some foods will switch between on and off. So sometimes, she'll have avocado and toast and cookies, and that will turn the medication on. She'll feel really empowered. She'll feel good. She'll feel herself. And then suddenly the avocado actually starts to turn the medication off, and then that will go to the off list. And so the foods that are influencing the medication and the effectiveness of the medication is constantly changing. And so her plan, her meal plan and treatment plan and requirements are therefore constantly changing. So if I was only given 6 hours of dietetics, for sure I could create a meal plan for her and say, these are the foods that turn the medication on. These are the foods that turn the medication off. Let's create a bit of a plan around the foods that work. Then suddenly none of the plan works anymore. And then her medication doesn't work. And then she's,
It's crazy
just,
because that whole time I had my mouth open, jaw dropped.
yeah.
Just literally, for people who obviously can't see me, I had my mouth open going, how the hell and why does not everyone know this? Like, I mean, to be honest, obviously I'm not allied health, right? So until, like, I work with a bunch of people and I've slowly learnt things, but seems to me to be such a massive piece of information in terms of how food interacts with medication, which I
Huge.
have never remembered speaking about, in all honesty. And this is why I love this industry and love having these conversations, because there's always something to learn. But wow, the interaction between food and the medications and different foods, adjusting that seems to me like something that should be shared when medications are being put forward.
Definitely.
And also possibly an argument for dietetics to be involved, obviously naturally beyond, especially in psychosocial space, which I'm going to do some thinking about.
And is there, because I'm really curious about this as well. Like, is, like, for Parkinson's, for example, are there certain foods that you like we just know are like don't interact well with the medication, or is it very personal?
It's usually the protein fiber rich foods that slow the absorption of the medication, so it influences the effectiveness. So we just kind of work on protein and fiber timing around the medication. We don't restrict it completely. But with this particular case, there's actually been a case series study on her at the moment. I think there's a lot of psychosocial behavior elements and perceptions towards food that's causing, the change between the foods that work on versus off. And again, I guess that also goes to show, right, just with limited funding, this is why I would then need to speak with the BSP. And then can the BSP speak to the participant about food and her perceptions on food, try and understand that, and then I create a plan of the food that works well for her. So there's so much interlink between different disciplines and constant changes with participants and change of circumstances in general. But medication's one of them. Definitely
I'm
one of them.
speechless, just to put it out there.
I'm just, because I'm not very nutrition sort of knowledgeable. So could you break down what you mean by, like, protein based and fiber and the timing of medication?
Totally. So protein is a macronutrient. It comes from foods like beef and fish and legumes. And fiber comes from the cell wall of plants, so fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. The best thing with protein and fiber is they keep the contents in your stomach for a long period of time, which means you stay nice and full. So what that basically means is if you're then having Parkinson's medication, which relies on very quick and efficient absorption, it will slow the absorption of the medication, and then it will reduce its effectiveness, essentially.
So does that mean that like around the time when you have your medication, you'd be kind of eating more carbs then? Is that the
Yeah,
alternative?
that's
Okay.
exactly right. And it doesn't mean that you omit protein and fiber completely. You just time it differently. So you might have a little bit more carbs at the time of the medication, lower protein, and then, an hour to 2 hours later, you might have your protein containing meal once the medication's actually kicked in.
And so like if you have like a medication, let's say like around dinner time, like how like what's the time frame between when you need to stop eating like fiber and protein and switch over to carbs so that the medication will work? Is that still the 2 hour window before as well, or?
Yeah, to be honest, this is very specific on the individual and the dose that they're on. But for certain participants, it's been maybe a 2 hour block.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so I'm just really this is fascinating to me because
Yeah.
this is like
Keep
I didn't
asking. I love
realize
it.
just how important sort of like timing meals was. And so okay, so that's sort of the quick acting medication when it comes to like Parkinson's. Is there any other type of medications where there's also kind of like this known effect that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, definitely. With multiple medications, even things from, the classic weight stabilizing medications. With that, you've got a lower appetite, meaning that you're probably not going to reach your protein and energy needs in general. You might lose a lot of weight in response to that, and then a lot of weight loss loses a lot of muscle mass. And then for people with muscle dystonia or mental health, that can negatively impact that. And even with that, on the note of mental health, actually, there's been a lot of evidence that those weight loss medications like Ozempic negatively impacts your mental health. So I have participants with those psychosocial disabilities, but they're overweight. They've been prescribed that medication, and it's actually aggravated their symptoms of mental health and depression and anxiety. So maybe this isn't exactly food medication related, but it just shows the impact that these medications can have on people in general.
There's so much that you need to be aware of. That's what I'm hearing.
That's it.
It's holistic environment, it's medications, it's timing, it's how that is interacting with that individual, what their particular mental health status is, all these different bits and pieces, what they like, what they don't like, what they like to eat, what they can and can't cook, how that all operates, what their team looks like. And to be able to kind of achieve all of that within a limited window of funding, let's not talk about the 5 sessions,
Yeah.
from that side. It seems extremely difficult. So my question now is, with the reductions, with the changes in transport, how is that impacting participants directly? Like, what are you seeing as an impact to them?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of participants get quite anxious. They don't know what the next steps are. They don't know if they're not going to have access to dietitians or not in the next plan. Um, they're losing access completely. There's so many things, and a lot of aggravation around that. Maybe they think that how much more capacity building can I possibly need? I just won't engage at all because it's too stressful. It's been negatively impacting participants, and that's my main concern. It's not for dietitians, it's not for business, it's actually for the participants and making sure that they get the support that they need.
Yeah,
And what's
absolutely.
and what's the so I mean now what would be something that maybe someone who doesn't have access to either a support coordinator or someone who kind of understands how to communicate the necessity for dietetics, or what do they do, like what's something that they can do to help communicate and advocate either for themselves or you know
For a loved
to look
one.
for a
Yeah.
loved one, like what can they do to help?
Yeah, I think they can just spread the word of dietitians and really, and at the end of the day, the scheme is built around choice and control. If you want to build a certain capacity in a certain area, you should be given that choice. So they should be standing for what's right and what they want. if in the capacity building budget, if there is EP, dietitian, OT, and they only want to use the EP budget because they want to start strengthening their muscles and things like that, they should have that option. Same with dietetics. If they've got a really big interest in in nutrition, and they want to learn to cook healthy meals for themselves, to support their weight and support their goals and mental health, they should have that choice to use those funds for that service. So standing with choice and control, going back down to basics, and also just finding providers that will fight for you.
And
I
I think
won't take no for an answer. I'm like, let's do
I know that.
this.
She's
I know
kicking
that.
down doors.
And based on everything we're discussing today, obviously there are quite obvious outcomes that come to it. Because I mean, look, we all understand the NDIS is an insurance scheme, and there is purpose to what everyone's doing here, including yourself. And I think everything we're talking about today has an outcome that could potentially benefit not only the participant themselves, but also I know this sounds like a little businessy, but it can also potentially bring some sustainability to the scheme in some cases where maybe food is the answer. Maybe an adjustment to certain types of nutrition reduces, behaviors, which may reduce the need for, certain situations, some level of support. Who knows? I mean, it seems like there are some cases there that are occurring. So, I mean, that's often an argument that gets used, especially from our perspective, to say, well, hang on, give us this amount of time with the dietitian to look at X, Y, and Z, and then we'll show a a reduction in needs in other areas, in some cases, obviously. So there is
Definitely.
outcome as
Yeah.
well.
And I think on that, the NDIS can be amazing. It is
Of
amazing. It's
course.
changed people's lives. Like the progress I've seen amongst participants, the access to supports when they actually have it. It can work really, really well if it's done right. So we just need to all stand together and advocate for what's right. And that just comes down to the participant, their choices, and what they actually want to succeed.
And there is a shifting landscape at the moment, and we're all aware of it. I know we're currently focusing on that particular shifting landscape, but I mean, I'm sure there are participants that have greatly benefited from the access to yourself as a dietitian.
Mm.
And is there any examples of that? Because I mean, I know because I'm mindful that we're always talking about, and I personally think it's a good thing to talk about what we can improve as a community as a whole, and I talk about it as a whole, the NDIS, us as providers, participants, all of us collectively saying, okay, let's make this world better.
Mm.
And that sometimes means talking about what we can improve. That's fine. But they're also, like I said, people that you're probably helping now that have greatly benefited from access to a dietitian that's come through the NDIS that they may not otherwise have had access to. Is there any stories like that you have that you can show or share? Sorry.
Definitely, definitely. I had a participant who had right arm paralysis and had multiple strokes throughout his career. He's actually an ex-chef on boats, and he was referred to me, and I went into his house and I did the initial assessment with him, and he basically was quite taken back. He had no care about health and nutrition and food, of course, going from being a chef to not being able to chop vegetables because you've got one arm would be quite upsetting. Anyway, we started to build his confidence again, and I actually got into the kitchen with him and started to teach him one arm recipes. And we ended up meal prepping all of his meals for the week. Every single week, we would fill up his fridge, and he actually took over that care by himself and is now doing that completely independently. As you can imagine, being an ex-chef and then being able to prep your own meals for yourself again with one arm, it just shows that nothing can actually get in the way of your goals if you've got the right support. And that's what's so important. And that's the one story I tell everyone, because it just shows we can do so much work in this space and we can see such incredible outcomes. So we just need to get the support from the government we need.
That underpins, for me, the whole point of the NDIS, that story. It's
Yeah,
about,
that is it. That is
is that
literally
not
it.
true? Is that not what we're all working towards, the independence of people that we're supporting? I mean,
There you go.
in and trying to help them work through whatever it is or what barriers or what things are in their way to be able to get to where they want to go.
That's it. And that goes back to say, with the Medicare model, right? If that participant was referred to me under the Medicare, I would be able to do the initial assessment. I would be able to educate him about stroke related nutrition therapy to prevent another stroke. I would have never been able to teach him the 1-arm recipes. I would never be able to capacity build so he can make the recipes that prevent another stroke. So this is where the difference between NDIS and Medicare is. And this is why NDIS is such a powerful tool. I just really hope that they don't continue to undervalue our work as dietitians. We make this space better.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's also kind of hard to like show that evidence as well, because you're kind of showing a lack of a problem, right? You're like, oh, look, so it's so much easier to prove when things are going wrong rather than when things are going right.
That's it.
So it's like, how do you like accurately capture this kind of like, independence and essentially like the successful part of you working yourself out of a role, which is what we're all trying to achieve here, like to have less contact with participants over the lifespan of their intervention. But Zoe, this has been such an amazing conversation. I've learned so much, and I just had one last question when it comes to medication interactions, because it's just
I love it.
Keep it going. I just can't let this go because it's just so fascinating. But I'm also wondering, like, obviously medications come with a lot of side effects, and we know that our participants generally have a lot of co-occurring conditions. And I'm wondering, like, with that obviously comes like a lot of medications and medication interactions. And so is part of your role also to help with like managing some of those side effects? So like, for example, statins, you can't have was it grapefruit? You can't have grapefruit because it makes you cramp or something. Like, is that a consideration when?
That is certainly, definitely. And clozapine, which causes weight gain and increased appetite. People with schizophrenia are usually on that medication, and then they can't control their eating habits. So that's where we dive in and we help with, nutrition therapy to control the eating habits, create better choices. There are so many things with medication and drug nutrient interactions. Other medications might prevent the absorption of certain nutrients like vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is really good for energy production. So, there's without energy, you don't make decisions. You feel you can't complete daily activity. So there is so many interactions, and this is why we work a lot with medications.
Oh my God. So fascinating. I've absolutely loved this chat. I just feel like, oh, I'm gonna have to speak to you after this because this is just
Definitely.
so good.
I would love it.
Yeah. But are there any sort of parting words or anything that you want to share, any projects that you're working on at the moment?
Yes, there is. So we are actually launching an event called My Cooking Rules. We've launched this. We're co-hosting with Connect Community and Respite Care. And basically, the purposes of the event is to create community inclusion and to help people identify some skills and love for cooking that maybe they didn't know they had. It's almost like another take on MasterChef or My Kitchen Rules without it being a competition. So there's going to be a panel of dietitians at the front, which sends a great message to the NDIS that we do more than just meal plans. And we're going to be taste testing and providing strength-based feedback for the participants. So that event is going to be on the 7th of August. It's coming around next month, which is crazy how fast time flies. But I do love that event because it just sort of gets people together, gets people involved. They can cook, they can enjoy food, they can enjoy social connection through food. And that is my one goal as a dietitian. So watch this space and super excited.
Amazing. That sounds so exciting. We'll definitely put up all the details. And what about for your service? How can they reach you if they need a dietitian?
They can just visit my website, which is www.brainofadietitian.com, and just submit an inquiry, and we'll go from there. We'll start the process.
All right. Well, Zoe, thanks so much. We've learned, I can only speak for myself, but I feel like I've learned a lot from these conversations. It's been so great chatting with you.
This is the first time I've been jaw dropped and speechless. So, I mean, take that.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on, Zoe. And for anyone else that's listening, if you have a story that you'd like to share, let us know. We're always open to having that conversation. And we'll see you in the next one.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.